I would be really interested in getting the cop in because I can't fucking break through that goddamn shield no matter like. They're the only. I had a police station here, full time. Well, obviously they're always full time, but a city department. And the only time I've ever reached out and just said, "Hey, listen, I'm in town. I'm here. Do you want to chat? Like, here's what I can do. Here's what I do. Here's some things you can look at or read about." Not a fucking peep. Nothing.
I feel like that's going to be a hard market to break into. I do happen to have connections to an OPP that I can chat with.
Yeah.
She seems very receptive to True Heroes Coffee, so I might be able to bring her in just through that connection and just chat with her from the ground level, anyways.
Wow. Yeah, they're hurting right now.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt.
But it's so funny. Like, so you meet the cops who buy in. That's all I meet, right? So, and there's not many of them. So I did there was like a tri-services presentation. They asked me to come in and do like a 15-minute spiel. They showed the other side of the hero, I think is what it's called, that documentary. Yeah. And we talked about it, and an OPP came up to me at the end and chatted. And I was like, yeah, like you guys, city cops, all of you are, they don't want, doesn't seem like you want anything fucking to do with the conversation. I knew another OPP she was really good. But it was that it had to be theirs.
Wow, that's the thing, right? And that's theirs. That's how it is with a lot of people. That's the way you convince people, right? You make it seem like it was their idea, and then you implement the guidance along the way.
We held a conference, and I had no part in the planning of it, but I was asked to MC it, and she left the board, like, of the organizers. She was just like, if this isn't like, if we don't have any of our people in it, then nobody's going to come. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Right. And like, it needed to be owned by them. And of course people came, but not a lot. And that's okay. There's more mental health people, but that's to be expected. I'm just like, what the fuck? Like, how do you break through that? I did another thing too, actually. They brought a buddy of mine in from CMHA, and he's like, so he gets the invite and he emails me and goes, man, I got invited by a bunch of first responders to come talk about peer work. He's like, can I just steal you to come in and talk about it? I'll stand there, but like, I got no idea.
Yeah.
Like, okay. Okay.
And that happens way too frequently.
Oh yeah. So the same officer, and she goes and asks him, of course, and not me, which I thought was fine, but that's okay. I got no ego in it, and she's like, well, my question is, you do all of this work, you get a peer group off the ground, and then, it goes good for a month or two, and then people stop attending. And Jackie's just like, oh, that's a really great question, Nick.
Yes. Yeah.
I was like, sounds like your group did what it needed to do, and people didn't need the service anymore. So I think the idea is, you don't force people to come. She's like, how do I get people to keep coming? I was like, can't force people to come. Your group did what it needed to do, and then it fizzled out. I think the consistency and constancy is what's going to be important. Just making sure that it's always a service available, and not
make it available. That's all that matters. As long as it's available and you're implementing the proper procedures, everything's fine. People will reach out when they need to.
Yeah, that's right. So
you can't force stuff on people. Like if you do, that draws them further away.
And some people just don't get that. They just do not get that at all.
People don't like being told what to do. They like hey, we should talk. We should go and see this. We should go and do that. Like, it needs to be an invitation, not I told you to do this.
It's like, and it's the siloing. It's the, you know what I mean? Like, I'm tired sometimes. It's just like, oh, fucking God. That's why I like writing, because at least I can push the boundaries. This is awesome because you and I can talk about whatever the fuck we want and get people on and do all of that. But it's, you know, so like last night's a prime example. The presentation I gave is different. Like I've made it slightly different over the years, but it's really the same presentation I give. Like if I go into a department for the first time, I give like the same kind of chunk of presentation. And last night one of the comments was, I go through all of the signs and symptoms of acute stress disorder, but it sounds just like PTSD. And I'm like, it's been 5 years since we've been having this conversation. Articles every day are coming out. Like, you should know, right? We're failing as educators if you don't know what the signs and symptoms are. The guy put his hands up and he goes, I think the problem is, because I think he was getting frustrated. It's like, what does it sound like? What do you think? And I think the problem is we've never had any education at all on PTSD, so we don't know, right? And I'm like, there's the fucking problem. It's like, it's skin in the game, right? Like, it's like and I wish I had thought about this. Probably wouldn't have said it anyway. That would have just set the world alight. But as it's like, you have a member that you're fighting for that's off, and you're pissed off about the way it's being handled. But you as individual members have no idea what PTSD is, what the signs and symptoms are, any training like that. It's like, you can pick up a book, you can read a fucking article, right? Like educate yourself a little bit.
Put yourself in a position to actually fight, right?
Right. Yeah. So, anyways.
Well, see, and that's the same thing that's happening. That similar thing is happening with our channel and the people that are giving backlash on it. It's like, I literally, first thing I ask, oh, how many episodes have you watched? Like, how much education have you put in for yourself to learn about it, to actually have an opinion and a foot to stand on for it, right? So these people that want to fight for their brother or their sister and help them out, first thing you can do is learn about what's going on, and mind you, you can't help everyone because you might be in a different position, or maybe you're in a position where it could hinder a lot of what you're doing, and you can kind of support them from the sidelines. But yeah, first thing is education. Learn about what it is you're actually trying to fight for, because maybe management's actually in the right and you just were never educated enough to know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think that the hard truth too is that at the end of the day, some people don't want the help. That's the hard fucking truth. You get lots of phone calls and conversations from people, or me, I do, about not even first responders, but just mental health in general. It's like, my daughter, or my husband, or my wife, or whatever is doing this. I'm worried. What can I do? No one will help. And first thing I got to say is, hey, I can't talk to you about that, right? Because we don't have consent. I don't have anything else. Broadly speaking, if they're not an immediate harm to self or others, they're allowed to be sick.
Yeah,
that's the truth. And so if you're not an immediate harm to self or others, you're allowed to be ill. And people have a hard time with that. And this is where I think people also get the anger from the system failing. They think that the system's failing somehow when you can let somebody walk around like that. And it's like, but that's their right.
That's exactly it, right? Yeah. And lots of times it actually takes that person before they realize what's going on. They have to get deep enough in that something flips, right? That switch goes off and they say, yep, I am going to accept your help because I need it. I've realized,
Yeah, or they get to the point where they are a harm to themselves or others. They're forced into the help, and then they recognize,
Yeah.
But I tell a story all the time about, someone that I was seeing wasn't a first responder, but this is where I think this system breaks a bit. It's like this person thought they were a serial killer, thought they had the blood of a serial killer in them. They thought that they were stolen from the hospital when they were young. The real father was a famous serial killer, and he needed to work at a slaughterhouse, and so that he could exercise that thirst in a non-violent way, right? He's talking about his his roommate's below him hammering nails into the floor, and so he can't even get out of his bed all the time, except for he's in my office, so I wasn't really sure how that happened, and all of these things. And so he ends up going to jail, and psychiatrist in jail says, I can't diagnose you because of substance use, but I'm gonna hit you with this drug, right? I think it was Invega, which is a super powerful antipsychotic. And dude's back on planet Earth, you know, hit it with it, symptoms gone, normal. And I'd seen this guy at that level, like, you know, he was doing well for a while.
Just needed that chemical balance.
Well, I mean, that's just it. When you have a significant disorder like schizophrenia, right? It's managed by medications.
Yeah.
And he back to earth, back to himself, you know, able to function again, recognizing, you know, maybe things were a little bit not square before.
Yeah.
And he gets out, and I'm trying to hook him up with services that'll help him directly with that diagnosis. And, you know, nobody will touch him because he doesn't have a formal diagnosis. And he can't get a formal diagnosis because he's got drug use within the last 90 days.
Yeah, which that's where most people are like, well, that's the reason it's happening.
But that's just the chicken or the egg argument, right? But this is the way I look at it. It's like, if my light is off and I flip the switch and it turns on, I don't go, well, I need to wait 90 days to figure out whether that switch was off or not, right?
Yeah.
I know that was the mechanism, right? It's like, you know, I have an overdose. So I have somebody passed out. It's like, well, I can't determine whether you're OD'd or just, you know, having a heart attack until, you know, 90 days from now.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you hit them with Narcan. If they come forward, it's an OD, right?
Yeah.
If they don't, then we know it's something else, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't need to wait. I've actually heard of, because there was, this is kind of nuts. I don't know if it's still the same way, but at the hospital, at least here, they couldn't actually test for fentanyl. They couldn't test for that. For some reason, it beat the test. So the way that they test was possible or potential ODs would come through, and they would ask EMS if they hit with Narcan, or they hit them with Narcan in the hospital. And that's how they knew.
That was the test.
That's how they know, right? It's like, yeah, but when you hit somebody with an antipsychotic and they come back to planet Earth, it's like, yeah, but we can't diagnose. Suspected, or we, you know, query is the famous psychological word that you'll find on forums when you don't really know. So we'll query, say, schizophrenia, or query depression, query whatever, right? It's like,
so are you saying then, like, we should kind of trust a little bit in that person? Like, okay, yeah, he's telling me that, you know, that light switched on and he needs help with it. Or are you saying we should try, you know, if we hear that, the signs and symptoms, maybe try something to do a little test?
Well, I think it's like a bit of both. So, you know, I wonder, sometimes I paint myself as a dinosaur with my fight for, you know, let's stick to a diagnosis. It was a conversation I had last night. They were really pushing that complex disorder is something that is a diagnosis. It's not a formal diagnosis. I don't disagree that we're using it. I get that. People are using it. Clinicians are using it. You will not get diagnosed with that on any of your medical records. Like, it's PTSD for now, and we can argue whether that's, you know, I think that it should change, honestly, but that's the diagnosis. But when you have somebody with such a stark difference like that one's just a really good one, because he was really sick and then he got this medication and got really well, right? But there's an argument out there, and I you know, I haven't read too much into it, but I think I like it on its premise so far, where mental health should be seen not as this rigid kind of stepwise thing, but on kind of continuums, right? And this explains a lot, because if you have seen somebody with a long-standing mental illness, even if it's like depression, anxiety, things that, you know, first responders certainly we aren't taking seriously, but the rest of the world does to some degree. You know, even if they're diagnosed with depression in you know, their teens, and then that transfers into something else over here, maybe more anxiety, and this transfers over to something else. You know, people get frustrated because they look down the diagnostic list and I see like 3 or 4 different diagnoses, right? It used to drive me nuts. It's like, well, what the fuck is it, right? Is it this? Is it that? Is it this? Is it that? I was talking about this article, and they were arguing that, you know, as we shift and grow, everything changes. So it's true in their teens they had anxiety, but it's also true in their 20s that they have depression, and it's also true in whatever, right? And the idea is that we need to have some more of a fluid understanding that um, these things can bleed into each other, right? And so you start to do things like I'm going to butcher this. I don't know. I don't remember. It's been a while since I read the article, exact terms they use, but something like um, the index problematic feature brings them in or something like that is currently depression, right? So I'll do a screener with you. You'll come through my office. You'll say, I'm feeling this, this, and this. And I'm going to go in my head, okay, that sounds like depression and anxiety, both of those happening at the same time. And then we're going to go through this assessment. And at the end of the assessment, whatever scores highest, we'll attack first, right? And so you get this stepwise kind of approach to the illnesses. But it also leads credence to the fact that you're not just one thing. You can have multiple things. Those things can shift and change as you shift and change, right? We know,
they say we go through like 7 major personality changes throughout our life, right? So like maybe that has something like you're saying, like those changes are there and they're going to happen because as we grow, you're experiencing different stresses in life, dealing with different things. Your brain's changing. So
I definitely, that's definitely true. I don't know about the 7 personality changes. I'd like to see read on that. That's an interesting idea because personality is really difficult historically to change, right?
Well, see, and I didn't hear it like you're completely changing into a different person, but the stages of growth throughout your life, right? Like you're going from, a baby into a child into a teen into an adult, and you're going through. I should look up on it too because I haven't read anything on it, but I've watched a couple of YouTube videos and I've heard from all kinds of people that are, they're a little ways up the chain in the business world and stuff like that, saying, and it might have been maybe it's 7 stages of growth. Who knows? But
I think seven situational changes, like that makes sense to me. But essentially, like my understanding of that, which is limited, but my understanding of that is, when we're young, we solidify some really deep-rooted core beliefs. They can be positive and negative, and we can do things about those. But essentially, those core values that we hold stay pretty static, right? So, belief in family or honesty or whatever.
Some things that are just bred into you.
Right. Yeah. And they become your bottom lines, right? And they actually become a really good therapeutic target that if you're coming through the front door and say you have relationship issues, you come through the front door, things that we want to uncover are those core values or beliefs, because then they're going to help us. So say you're in a toxic relationship and that toxicity maybe stems from the fact that you're trespassing on all these values, right?
Right. That's a good point.
Right. And so you think about first responders coming through the door. It's like, what are your core values around your identity? Right. Well, we don't talk to outsiders. We're strong. We're stoic. We're salty. We're this, we're that. That identity so wrapped up into it, and then we have to look at these core values around, first responders. Do we talk about it or not? Right. So,
point.
So when I hear the personality thing, I think that the they you're talking about, we might want to be careful there, but maybe I'm wrong. Like I'm not too well versed in it, but I think we have those static pieces, right? You think about a bad relationship you've been in, and what did you trespass on? Right? And it's hard to do because you're wrapped up in all the oxytocin waves and
exactly. It's emotional in the moment. Now I could probably have a decent conversation about the things that went wrong and why, and like if you actually think about it, most times it comes down to the way that you're feeling. But why did you feel that way? What was happening? And now that you say it and I hear it, that makes a lot of sense. That's probably why a lot of my relationships failed, because of those morals I had, or those preset plans that, in my head were the most important things being stepped on. Are you saying hi to the wife?
Yeah, she came down. I think she wants some breakfast. Hey, babe?
You better make her some breakfast.
But I think that makes sense, right? Like, and so that's just some basic therapeutic stuff that you look at. But when you look at that, I think the interesting thing, especially about relationships, and they can be anything. They don't have to be intimate, right? If you look at family relationships, friendships, all of those pieces, it's about this. It's a slow progression. It's not like you walked in that relationship, you're like, you know what? Honesty and monogamy is not really important to me. Let's have open relationships and we'll be polygamous or whatever, right? It's not like that. You walk in and things are great for a while. And then, you get, what's the term? I think it's called like the foot in the door from like door to door salesman. So I think that this is the term. So if they can get their foot in the door, they know that they can make a sell. So I
Right.
ask you something small, right? It'll push the boundaries a little bit where it's like,
Constantly pushing it a little further and further until
right,
that
yeah,
purchase is made.
yeah. And so I can do that, over time, and then you can push back, and then I can step back for a little bit and sit in there, and then I can start to push, right?
I know that game. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So uh, you think about relationship stuff, right? Friends, intimate, whatever. You think about that, and you're like, yeah, it was about 4 months before he really did convince me that robbing a bank was a good idea. You know what I mean? It was like, oh yeah, that is a good idea for all of these reasons that he slowly broke down. And then it's like, but honesty, integrity, virtue, those are all really important things to me. So no wonder I feel so shitty and cannot forgive myself for that.
That's right.
And I had someone like that, right? It got to the point where, I was seeing them, I think we suspected pretty like dysthymia. So it's like kind of a semi-permanent depressive state, which is really hard to get rid of. And, his core belief was around honesty and integrity, and had gotten to a place in his life where robbing somebody was what needed to happen in his eyes. And could not forgive himself because when they went and robbed him, they were home and it was an elderly person, right?
Emotional
So,
connection right away.
boom, and he's just like, who would do that? And I'm like, well, what changed, right? What changed? That you were going to go do it, and that seemed okay until you found out who lived there. What if you had never known who lived there? Would that have changed it? What if you found out 4 months later that it was an elderly person? Would that have changed it, right? And they didn't hurt them, right? Same, but they got caught, right? But it's like, what changed? And it was this idea of that core belief, that core value, and we couldn't shake it, right? That's how strong they are. We kind of hit a stalemate in our work together because I'm like, listen, like I'm throwing everything I got at it. But I don't know if I've got the guns to help you with this kind of deep-seated, deep-rooted thing. And I certainly, working in a community base, and don't have the ability to extend what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
But that was the sticking point, because if I can't forgive myself because I've crossed that value, there's no work to be done. I can help you with skills and tools. I can help you manage these other pieces over here. At the end of the day, you're still going to beat yourself up. You're still going to hate yourself. And that self-loathing is like amphetamine to healing.
That's deeper roots, and that's something that you kind of have to untie on your own.
Yeah. And so, making the first responder connection, I think you look at time spent getting your education. If you're doing that, getting certified, climbing ranks, maybe, or being welcomed or accepted in. And then, I've heard arguments about, I'm not on long enough to talk about, like, I'm not on long enough that I should have a problem. Right. Or, that call shouldn't have affected me, so I can't talk about it, right? Or, this was I signed up for this, so I got to take it as it goes, right? It's those
That's
core,
so fucked up.
yeah, it's those core values, though, right? That we instill, right? It's those core values. If I'm stealing like a term from sociology, right? We call it the hidden curriculum. So, you think about going to high school, there's all the rules, got to be on class on time, got to be, but then there's the ones that we inadvertently learn, which is, I've got to toe this line if I want to stay in this clique, and I got to dress this way if I want to be accepted or welcomed. And
Same thing happens in your family.
Yeah, same thing happens in the fire service.
Yep.
Right? So
that's exactly it. There's a lot of those actually now that I'm like I was awake to them right in the beginning, and I always have been, which is why I think I don't have a lot of close friends that I work with, because those exact things. Well, you're not following this, but for me, that's against what I'm about. Like especially with what we're doing here, people don't like it because it's against what's been practiced for so long, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And in my eyes, I'm like, if I can even help one person, I can change the world. And I'm telling people straight out of the gate, I'm not trying to treat, I'm not trying to diagnose. You're certified in all this stuff and you're still not trying to do it. You're just sharing information
Yeah,
and
and I can't
connecting,
diagnose anyways, right?
right?
But
So
we can talk about diagnoses, right?
that's right. Well, we can talk about just about anything as long as we're not trying to do something that's against the law,
Yeah,
right?
that's right. Yeah. And so
So,
maybe what we do at the end of it is we just recommend people take up crystal and spirit therapy, and they'll all be healed and cured.
well, I mean, essential oils are the new thing, right? Dude, I've been shot. Oh, I got
Yeah,
an essential oil for
yeah.
that. No
Don't
worries, no
worry.
worries.
um, yeah. Well, and I think ruffling feathers is what needs to happen, because maybe what happens is you force another conversation that goes against what we're saying, and that would be an interesting thing to see and read, right? It's
Well,
like,
and that's where again I encourage our entire audience. Like, if you have a different opinion and it's branched out from what we got going or information you want to share, by
yeah,
all means, like
yeah,
pop onto the show and let's talk about it. Like you're saying, I'm sure people's opinions are starting to come up and they
yeah,
want to say something to us, right? Like,
yeah,
why wouldn't you just come on and share it with us and
yeah,
change my mind?
yeah. But I'm not 100% sure, because so far anything that we've talked about, I I think I stick behind everything I've said. I don't have anything that I've said where I'm like, I cut that out, right? Anything that I've said has been off the cuff. What I'm learning is super surprising, because I've released articles, right, arguing against the idea that it's an injury and not a disorder. I've argued against why we're only approaching one diagnosis and not taking this more seriously, and all of these things. And I think I've gotten like one bad email, you know, and then that bad email, it was a conversation that we had back and forth, and then that I think that smoothed that out, right? It was a misunderstanding, a misreading
Yeah.
of what I was trying to say. And
I
so,
think that's where most of it comes from, right? People, they misunderstand what you said and then it gets them worked up. And then when you talk it out, they're like, oh, okay, no, that's exactly how I think.
yeah, yeah, when you realize that what I'm saying is, when you realize what I'm saying is that we're not taking this serious enough,
yeah,
right? If we're calling every single thing that happens to us, like the other day at the training, we were talking about different forms of PTSD, which to me is like, I don't understand that, right? But it was, well, some of it, maybe linked to depression, and some of it's linked to anxiety, and I said, but here's the problem. Here's where, and I strongly own this. This is where like psychoeducation is failing you, right? Where the psychologists, the educators, the researchers have done a shit job at putting that information out, because there's no reason why I should be grouping anxiety, depression into making it fit with a PTSD diagnosis, right?
yeah,
Is it essentially, if I have any kind of mental health issue and I'm a first responder, it's PTSD. That's what's coming up. And that's problematic, because if you go to get a diagnosis, you might not get the PTSD one. And that's going to be a problem for you,
yeah.
right?
Because it could be anything all grouped under that, right? Like
Right.
it just,
Well, I put that thing out months and months ago now, and it said, uh, it's talking about trauma and needing to deal with my emotions. And it's like, well, other than this crippling anxiety, I feel fine, right? It's just not bad enough to be taken seriously yet.
yeah.
Where, I'm just like, why are we waiting? Why are we supporting an approach that waits until it's the
Well,
worst case
and why
scenario that
wouldn't
gets
we
reported?
attack it from all angles?
That's right. Yeah.
Like we do with firefighting. We
Hmm.
literally surround the building and drown it until it's out.
Well, I mean, real firefighters go in Colorado.
Right. Oh, sorry. Sorry. That, whatever.
I don't know.
Fast
I don't know
attack.
how they.
Fast
I don't
attack.
know how they do it in Alberta, but we go in and hit the seat of the fire.
But that's what I mean, right? Like you you throw all your resources at it until you solve the problem, and you do it
Mhm.
strategically, right?
Yeah.
So why are we just focused and bottlenecking ourselves
Mhm.
into one corner, right? Like
Yeah.
like you're saying, like there's a lot of different things going on, and we don't need to group it under one thing. Like you're saying, you might not get that diagnosis
Yeah.
if that's what you need to take the time off to deal with the problem. Then that's not okay. you should be able to take time off for being depressed or, you know, dealing with your other mental health problems, not just a PTSD diagnosis.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I agree. And this is one of my sticking points and my anger points. And where, you know, the push, and even in research, the push just can, you know, PTSD is the thing that we're going to get, PTSD is the thing that we're going to get research funds for. It's going to be the thing that gets credence. It's going to get traction. It's going to get all of those things. And so, you know, the cultural approach is shaping the research approach.
Yeah.
And
Like
that's a hard
it's
thing,
becoming
right?
a movement now in order to be able to fund projects.
And you know, and rightfully so in a lot of ways. I mean, PTSD is the worst case scenario, right?
Yeah.
So you know, it needs the biggest guns, as it were, to deal with it, and so it needs research funds. But you know, and what I am hoping for is too idealistic. But you know, I would love to see a research paper that looks at you know, anxiety in the fire service. How do you manage that? Well, how do we take that seriously, right? Like general anxiety disorder, which is this kind of anxiety reactions with no direct cause, right? Like there's not one thing that I'm scared of or feeling that fear response of, right? And I don't know, which is why it can be really debilitating. So I don't understand. I wake up with that blip in my stomach all day, and then it gets worse, right?
Yeah.
Or you know, how to navigate symptom-based anxiety in, you know, policing. It's like if I'm driving around in my car and I've got constant headaches and muscle tension and heart palpitations and all of those things, but I'm not thinking about anything. It's like, how do I work on not thinking I'm dying? Like, right? And depression is, you know, the same thing, and it'll come. I think it will. But you know, what I see is it's just, I wish that we could talk about those things and they would be taken as seriously as PTSD, because I think what's happening is our cultural approach is shaping the research driven approach, right? You know, response made to me on some research, right? It was, we're using injury because it's progressive. And I said, well, I've got problems with that. Like obviously I don't think we should hinder whatever the research project come. And, you know, and I think that being involved in pushing out anything is better than pushing out nothing. But if that's the argument, if that's the argument for why we're changing the name, it's a shitty fucking argument,
It's horrible, yeah. Well,
right?
and you're just changing it just so it makes it so it has a better look, right?
That's right. That's
And
100%.
there's a lot better ways we could go about it, right?
Yeah, and I get it, right? It's like calling, you know, it's calling cough syrup cherry because cherry is your favorite flavor, but you forget because the last time you took it, it tasted like shit, and you remember it still tastes like shit, right? It's like,
Yeah.
you know, I'm going to call it something that's a little bit more appealing, and so that I can get the funding. And so part of me is like, the, you know, the frontline me, the one that's like, yeah, we do whatever you got to do. And this is what I say about, you know, injury and all of that. And I know we've been over it, right? But it's like, whatever you got to do, whatever you got to call it. If you're frontline, get through the door. If you're suffering, just fucking call it that. I don't care, right? But as policymakers, as researchers, as psychoeducation, what we want to do is take the stigma away from the disorder word to begin with, and so that it doesn't matter, right? So that we can call it. We get so wrapped up in the terms, right?
Call
Complex
it whatever and just deal with it.
complex PTSD. We gotta call it that because it's multiple traumas and it's all of these things. And I agree with you, right? But that's not that's not a DSM diagnosis yet. It's just
Yes.
not. And so that's what you're going to be diagnosed with. And so when you show me a WSIB form, it's not going to say complex. It's going to say PTSD as per DSM-5, right? And so let's just take away that. Let's not compete with each other about how bad it is, right? And then, so then we're even making people with index traumas that are singular. Maybe we have one call traumas that we can identify. Or
Yeah.
even making them feel worse. It's like, well, I have complex PTSD, so that's way worse than yours. Now I need quadruple the time, right? I'm just like, why can't we just have that conversation where it's not about upping it, where it's not about making it worse. It's not about
It's
any
all
of that.
serious. It's all
It's all
something we
very
need to deal with.
serious.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not a competition, right? And that sometimes when I'm on there, and maybe this is my narrow-mindedness or my spitefulness, but I just go, you know, we're just trying to create competition. And people get angry about it, right? They get mad about it. It's like, well, professionals are using that term. I was like, I fucking understand that, but it's incorrect. Like, I get it. I get all kinds of people with lots of letters behind their name are using the fucking term,
Yeah.
but that doesn't make it real. That does not make it a real diagnosis. You want to talk about whether it should be? I think it should be.
Yeah.
I think it should be in the PTSD or the DSM, but it's fucking not yet. So, as long as we're clear, right? You're going to say complex, and I'm going to go, okay, we can talk about that. I understand what you mean. But if we're talking about accurate, actual diagnoses, it's not there, not yet.
And I think that comes down back again. We've discussed this a few times. Is education, like properly educating not only the people, but the people with the letter behind their name. Letting them know, like, you're using this as a tactic to push your idea or your thoughts is not okay for the general public. It's just making things worse. You're confusing people, and it's making some things seem more serious than others when really it's all fucking serious.
Yeah, every part of it, right? And I think too, what's happening, right, is that because of the closed off nature of the first responder culture, is professionals need to have that buy-in somehow. And so it's like, I can use a shared language. So if the first responders continue to create language, they're going to continue to use it.
That's right.
Which is like, I'm not against it. I'm not against this, but
no,
we gotta be clear on why we're doing it. So as professionals, it's like, if I'm dealing with a frontline person, they're in my chair and they are wanting to deal with a post-traumatic stress injury. That is the language I will use with them day in and day out in that chair. 100% respect whatever you need to call it to make you come in, right? But when I'm on here, if I'm in front of policymakers, if I'm talking to management, if I'm writing articles, it's like, we have to try, like, we're not taking stigma away by changing names all the time. And we're not helping, I think, the stigma if, as professionals, we're chasing down the cultural changes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, and like you said, like, they're using it as a conversation starter, and by all means, they should use whatever they can, like you were saying, but we should not be educating people in that way. We should be telling it like it is, and try and develop the programs that are needed to be developed in the right way to combat specific things as they come along.
Yeah, the way I look at it, suffering is suffering.
That's right.
Right? So suffering is fucking suffering. So if you're suffering, you're suffering. You don't need to be more suffering.
Yeah.
You don't need to be more complex suffering.
You shouldn't have to scale it up to find the help you need.
Yeah. Or to feel like people, and I think that people hear complex and they go, oh, it's serious.
Yeah.
Right? That's the response, because we have this word at the front of it. And it's like, it's all fucking serious. Like, why is that a thing, right? Why do I got to capture that like that? But again, and this is coming from somebody who believes that we should have that diagnosis. I think that makes more sense. It captures the nature of the fact that, especially for first responders, but certainly not only for us, there's multiple times we can be exposed to potential stressors.
That's right, in all different forms. Like, that's where I quite frequently use with my wife and her job. She has caregiver fatigue, but really that's just under the blanket of PTSD. Like, she could be dealing with a lot more than just caregiver's fatigue, but that's just all I'm seeing because she hasn't, reached out in that sense yet. Who knows what's going on with her? But as soon as I tell someone, oh yeah, she's got PTSD, it's at a whole nother level to them. And I'm like, I don't get it. Like, why isn't her being, fatigued from her job and it's causing a lot of other issues in her life? How come that's not being taken as serious as PTSD, right? Like, as soon as I say PTSD or if I say, she has a disorder of some sort, it's a whole different level. Like, I don't know. It boggles my mind when people do that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing, right? Suffering is just suffering. So it's a pet peeve, and it'll get worked out, and I know that this is a sticking point for me, that other people go, whatever, Nick, like, just fucking move on. But for me, it's important because I think, like, it's just a sign that we're fucking up the education piece. And as somebody who's working hard to do it, and I feel like I'm, kind of solo in that echo chamber and what, of putting that article out. The reason that I know that I'm hitting good points, I think, is because I don't get the pushback I'm expecting. Like, I launched that injury versus disorder article, and I thought that I thought I had to close up shop and go hide on a rock, and it didn't happen. And I think people get it, right? But we don't want to talk about it. The public opinion is all a competition around, can I create the right buzzword? Can I create the right atmosphere? Can I create the right saying, motto, approach that people will flock to my service?
That's right.
The problem of siloing, I think this is the big deal. It's like, how do I get the edge on others? So over here, I'm going to call it injury. It's like, that's okay, that's edgy, that's new, and people can understand it and relate to that. But then I want to call it, now I'm going to put out this education piece that says, you're born with a disorder, you develop an injury, right? And we're going to put that psychoeducation out, and we're going to call it end stigma is going to be our hashtag. And it's like, that's the type of shit that we foster when we're getting it fucking wrong and we're not educating properly.
Do you think part of that might have to do with like business wise when it comes to the mental health area?
Listen, there's a point, I think, that there's a point where you, as somebody who wants to help and support, have to make a decision, right? So like me, I'm winding down now, but I could literally run myself ragged, because I hardly charge for what I do. I want the information to be as free, as accessible to as people as you want. But that means I got to work a full-time job. So then I'm away from home, I'm away from family, and all of that things constantly. And so when you want to put out a program, you go, okay, I need to make this marketable so I can do this and make a living at it.
That's
right. People got to pay mortgages. I get that. But then, there's Sean. And then, but then it becomes, okay, so now I'm making a living, but how do I get more money for the program? And how do I up it the next step? And how do I develop this web page? And how do I keep that running? And then how do I get trainers? And so then it becomes a business. And I think once it becomes a business, and I think we've seen this happen, you get a fucking angle, and you stick with it because that's your bread and butter.
Yeah, it's selling.
Right. And so I think there's some weird transition point where you get to a point where it becomes less about the work and more about how do I keep it going, regardless if you're right or wrong or whatever.
See, and that's where, like with True Heroes Coffee, my whole thought was, yes, I want to help people, but I need funding to help people. And I'm not going to sell the services that people need to access, because I feel like you said, they should be free. They should be easily received or even just given to you. So how can I fund that? Oh, I need a product. And that's where the coffee came in. I was like, well, not only does it tie into first responders and emergency services and stuff like that, because we practically live off of it, but I can use that money to put towards those programs. And then at that point, that's where I've thought about starting my own foundation that gives that stuff away. I can find someone to help me run that and give that education away. And I can literally get to a point where I can pay someone like you to go around and offer these free services. You're making a living spreading the word, and you can be 100% focused on helping those people. But those places that need it most aren't having to pay for it, and it's easily accessible, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I think what we're seeing though is what's he saying? I think what happens is that transfer of that thing that changes along the lines, right? Like, and it's siloing, because mental health is funded like, the hated stepchild, really. I think to be nuanced too, is that the idea that I hear that a lot, like, helps out there. You just got to reach out for it. We could even focus on an episode of why that's true, but also not true, because I think it's like the help is out there. You just have to reach out for it. But therapy is more like an art than a science, which is it's unfortunate, right? But what did that mean? That means if you and I walk into a museum together, you might be drawn to the Rembrandts and I'm drawn to the dinosaurs. You know what I mean? So we're going to have different flavors and tastes, and what's going to work for us is different. And that's such a frustrating thing for folks, because they say, the big thing right now in first responder world, EMDR approach, right? Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. That's the big thing. There's research that shows that it works. We don't know why it works yet. But that's being pushed, right? That's being pushed and pushed and pushed. And then, so I go for an EMDR session. It doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, then obviously I'm fucking broken, because this is the thing. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is, this is this is what CBT isn't. And this is what cognitive processing therapy isn't, or what,
there's not one fix all.
That's right. But people are pushing this as the save all, right?
Yeah.
It's really big. And, I'm hesitant, not because I don't believe it works, because I think that that's an unavoidable truth. But the idea is there's not one way, and you're going to be, you're a motorcycle and I'm a truck guy, right? Like, it's just going to be different like that. We've got to be patient with that process.
Yeah. And I mean, you can't cater to everyone, but you can definitely, you can alter programs so that way they're a little bit more fitting and make it easier for people to get at.
Oh yeah. One of my pet peeves is people saying that things need to be individualized. This is a pet peeve of mine, because I don't understand what that fucking means, right? So I've got to create a therapy that's for you, and then when someone else comes through my front door, I got to create a new therapy for them. That's fucking asinine, right? Like, and yeah, I don't know. I guess I wrapped up in the nuance here.
Well, in a way you kind of do, but you don't, right? Because like, if you're constantly recreating a program for that individual person, you're never going to use it again. That's a little tough, right? Like, that's tiring, and
it's impossible.
The way that you probably do it is you sit down and you get to know the person first, and you figure out their individual needs, and then you alter a program that you have that kind of fits to what they need. But you could probably do 90% of that program with them until the end, and that's when you change a little bit just to make it a little bit more fitting.
But I think this is the misunderstanding of therapy, and maybe maybe I haven't walked through enough therapist stores myself to really understand that this is like a widespread problem. But it's if I'm a carpenter and I build houses, I have the same fucking tools every time I go to a house, but the house looks different every time, because I have different plans, and I've got a different approach, and I've got someone who wants something a bit different, but I have the same fucking tools, right? Like, so you walking through my door, I'm not saying, oh, good, you look like the last person, we'll just do what we talked about.
Yeah.
Like that for me, that never fucking happens.
You're using the same tools, you're just using a different approach, different plan.
So I don't understand this criticism, right? I don't understand it. And we push it, and then people get worried. It's like, well, you're just going to treat me like everybody else. I'm like, what does that fucking mean? Like, I don't understand what that means. That I'm going to treat you like everybody else. It's like, okay, so any middle-aged 30-year-old dudes, I'm going to treat this way. And then any, middle-aged 30-year-old women, I'm going to treat this way. And like, that doesn't fucking happen, right? It's like, what's going on for you? What do you want to work on? What has worked in the past? What hasn't? Where do you want to start?
Yeah. And that's the best way to do it.
To me, that's the only fucking way to do it. But like I said, there's this opinion out there. So I guess people are doing it different, and that's unfortunate, and they should stop.
Agreed. No, the analogy you said with the houses, that's exactly it, right? Like, everybody is different, but the same tools will do the job. You just need to, change up the approach and how you're going about it.
Yeah. And I mean, there is some point, and I say this to everybody that walks through my door, I might not be the guy for you, right? You might be a log home guy, and I'm a Viceroy guy, right? So it may not be the right one for you, but we'll give it a shot. We'll give it a go, and then you and I can decide. So if we get to a point where, like, this isn't working, I can help you find the log guy, right? Like, it's not a problem.
Yeah.
But I think most people that walk through the front door, don't get me wrong, not everybody that walks through the front door walks away cured and happy, whatever the fuck that means, right? But I think everybody walks away with something. And that's, the best we can really hope for, is that you walk away with something. You walk away with enough hope, energy, approach, skills, tools that you can walk through another door. And then maybe that's the home builder for you, right? But anyways,
maybe you need to start with a starter home. Work your way up, right?
Yeah, I just don't understand that. That's something I don't understand. So it'd be interesting to get somebody on with a strong opinion on that, because I've got some strong opinions in the therapy world anyways, but I think that doesn't make sense to me. But anyways, man, I think I have to wrap up here. Sounds good, man.
Okay, have a good night, or a good night, good day. Tell the
Get
wife
a,
I said hi.
yeah, get a nap in there for you. Eh?
Yeah. No, I got
Right.
a couple showings today. No napping for me.
Yeah. Tell Sean to rest up.
I will.
Yeah.
See you later, buddy.
See ya, man. Bye.